Hi, everybody. So I just thought I'd come in here. This is where we left off the day before. Where after everything on my outline is inked, I basically, ooh, I missed a spot. You can usually tell when it's super shiny there. I missed a spot right here as well. You want to go through and you want to inspect to make sure everything has been covered in ink of some kind. Now, you might notice that some places might seem a little light for you. You're like, oh, it's not as black as I really want it to be. I want it to be super black. Let it dry for a little bit. Then go back in and add another layer of Sharpie, and you should be fine. Because it really does sometimes, this paper soaks up the water or the ink so well that it might be a little bit too light for you, like for me. But you can see some stroke pattern and stuff in there. I'm sorry. You can see some stroke pattern in there as well, like the strokes of your pen going up and down or sideways. So now that I've got pretty much the gist of basically everything laid out, I am noticing that I am a little, I think the composition is good. If you really need to, you can like slightly cut off the top of it to make it more centered, but I kind of like it being a little bit lower. That's fine. So make sure that you let the ink dry as long as possible. Maybe 24 hours would be probably a good time frame to really kind of let it sit and dry. I have the majority of my detail pretty much right here on the inside where his eyes are at. So I'm going to really pull out my image of that I've been referencing to have it next to my drawing to make sure that when I'm going into inks and stuff, I pretty much have everything that I need. So go back in and really kind of adjust certain areas that you feel that you might need to. I'm going in with a little bit more work. So I'm going to use the very fine tip Sharpies to go in and do some detail work on the inside. If I feel as though it's not really giving me the effect that I'm looking for, I'll probably go back in with a wider tip Sharpie, but I want to really lay out the outline because now that I've got so much graphite there and my hands kind of smudged it, it's a little hard to see. So I'm going to go in probably to the eyeball first and go in here. Oh, no, I want to, you know what? Where do I want to start? I'm going to start with the right side, which I don't typically do, but once I'm done with the right, I'm going to let it dry for a second. Then I'm going to put a napkin over it so I don't smear it when I work on it. I just feel as though I'll get a little bit more of a better composition if I can get this one inked out. Probably the most difficult part about this for me would be to get the really nice roundness of his glasses. The glasses really, John Lennon's glasses are pretty much the most profound part of John Lennon. Now, as you will probably see if working with a fine tip pen, it might dry out or get a little sticky sometimes. So I usually try to keep a blank piece of paper to the right side. So if I need to go back in and get the ink flowing again, you can do that. But trying to keep the pen as vertically as possible, probably get you more flow because it's a gravity-based pen. So the once the ink comes out the tip, the gravity will come down from the base of it to the top. So you might need to go in, since we are going over graphite and watercolor or whatever you're doing, you might need to go in and make sure that you keep that pen as vertically as possible. And I notice as I'm working through it, it's drying out my pen really quickly. And honestly, that could be one of two things. It could be the fact that I haven't used this Micron in a very long time. So I'm not really getting what I want from it. So you can switch it up if you want, or you can just use it to outline the edges of stuff that you want to. Yeah, this thing is just dry as a bone. Wish I had my felt tip Sharpie. So I'm just going to have to be really trusty with this one. So I'm going to go in and really make sure that I'm laying down a lot of my ink lines. If you keep your pen as vertical as possible, you can get more control over the tip of the pen. And the lighter the pressure, the lighter the line. So I'm going to go in. The really light touch. and really kind of lay in a little bit of the saturation. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really feel comfortable with the control. This really kind of goes into it because of the shadow. Always have your picture as a reference. You really, really, really want to have that reference. So this outside line represents basically the outside of the rim of the glasses. So I want the rims of the glasses to be pretty much the colored background because that will really make the glasses kind of pop. So I am going to go back in with a fine tip. You can always rotate your paper as you work through it. I find this best whenever I have to do anything with the curved because I always like to go in a downward stroke. The more graphite I have on there, the harder it is for that fine tip to really grab onto the ink. So I'm going to go in there. I know it's scary. I'm going to go in there with a darker, lighter tip. It's probably not going to be perfectly round, but that's okay. You have to be okay sometimes with it not being perfect. I learned that in lots and lots of years of art. So really kind of pull it away from you a little bit to really get that reference. Go back in. That's a pretty good line for it. I have a little bit of a shadow here, so I want to make sure that I really go in and get that shadow line. As you'll notice, it will get a little bit light. It goes all the way up until the bridge of the... So let it dry a little bit. Let's be okay with it drying just a tad bit. It does, I know that you could visually see the eye wear all the way around, but if you want to leave it to where it's not doing absolutely everything because of the fact that you only really get the outer edge here, that's fine. It just, like I said, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It really doesn't. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do the bridge of the nose piece, which will blend into the shadow of his brow. Really laying on a nice dark. I noticed that my brow doesn't go high enough, so I'm going to arc it up a little bit more. And it goes into his hairline, which I will then ink in. And there is pretty much the outside edges of his glasses. Now, if you really wanted to, you could probably go back in with a little bit of a white highlight to kind of get in there. But I'm not really going to focus a little bit on that. I'm really not. I'm just going to focus on, actually that bridge is up right there a little bit more. Take a second, stop, step away, look at it. If you like it, leave it alone. You don't want to go too far. That's one thing that I have is editing. And then I'm like, oh, I blew my line, and then I end up getting super frustrated. So let that sit for a second, let it dry, right? I know the glasses in the picture are a little bit thinner, but you get the gist of basically what's going on here. You want to try to keep this eyewear very similar in size when you run it across because the glasses are pretty symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of tissue and I'm going to lay it over the face. Because when I'm working right-handedly, with my right hand, I don't want it to smear. So I'm going to go back in and start with his brow. I'm going to outline the brow. I'm going to go in and outline the inside of the eye because I feel pretty comfortable with the placement of that. If you overwork the paper with your pencil, it will become a little bit harder to control that nice crisp line. But what I'm going to, because that's what ended up happening, is I lost the top of his rim of his glasses here. So I'm going to go back in and maybe construct it by doing an outline that represents the shadow work. Color it in a little bit. So when I go back in to erase certain things, it won't be so much of an issue. So this line here, I'll just bring down to represent the bottom edge of his glasses, which will go into the arm piece. And then the outside line here is a really good representation of basically where the eye line goes. And you really want it to be curved as much as possible because it's super round. Drag your piece with you. Probably going to pull it over just a little bit more. Stop, double check it. Keep it, make sure it's on your right hand side. And then there we go. There's a pretty good representation of where I want his eye to be. So I have tons of graphite in this area here. I don't really super love it. So I might just bring this line out here to represent this edge here. Maybe bring the eye line a little bit down a little bit further to indicate the shadow here. It's all in the working of it. And then there you go. I'm going to let this dry. And then I'm going to go back in and erase it a little bit. So you can go back in and erase any of the smudge that you see. Now I had gone over this with watercolor, so some of that smudging kind of ended up turning into the watercolor itself. But if you really go in and start to erase after that ink dries, you can go in and clean up a lot of the graphite. As I do this, I'm seeing I didn't go back with my color all the way. Ooh. I may have to go back and touch that up with a little bit of watercolor. I don't know, I kind of like it like that though. That looks pretty cool. Yeah, but once the entire thing is completely covered in ink, what you want to do is you want to go back in and erase any kind of line work that you see along the outside edges. It's probably anything that's covered with a Sharpie. It's probably not going to do it. And you don't want to do it too much to where it starts to take any of the, the watercolor off the paper, because watercolor paper tends to be really, 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 really light. But if you do, you can always go back and add some more watercolor to it. But the distressed kind of look of the whole thing really kind of makes it pop. But if you do, and you take a little bit of time to clean up your areas around the whole entire thing, like the line work that might have been there when we were doing the grid lines to lay out the face, it's really going to help clean it up a lot. And it's going to make it look a little more clear, a little bit more crisp, a little bit more polished. But yeah, I don't know why this line will not go away. That one is there for good. Maybe I should embrace that and do, ooh, you know what? I'm going to do that. Sometimes a mistake can become a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say. I'm going to embrace this line that won't be erased, and I'm going to go in and line it and give an outside edge of his outside edge of the rimmed glasses that he's wearing. There we go. That worked out. All right, there we go. And there, ladies and gentlemen, is a partially finished piece that I'll probably go in with a little bit of red watercolor there. I don't know. I kind of like it. It is a little bit, I don't know, I'm a little torn. So, because you want the whole thing to be finished. But this is basically what a very finished piece should look like. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is beautiful in its own way. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come see me during office hours. If not, I will see you guys later. Have a fabulous, fabulous weekend. Bye, guys.